I'm tired.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Late Morning Program with Namras podcast, the #1 Hare Krishna podcast in the world. Today is a really interesting episode. I'm here with Govardhana Prabhu, Govardhana Das. Thank you, Prabhu, for joining me.
Hare Krishna, thank you for having me.
No problem. So today's episode is called Return to Grace, and this is episode 51. And I'm looking to do 100 episodes by the end of the year. So let's see if that happens. But I actually wanted to do some episodes. I put a Facebook post out maybe a few months ago where I said, does anyone know anyone who kind of either left Krishna Consciousness altogether or left and came back? And I'd like to hear their story. So a good friend of ours, Nityananda Chandra, mentioned your name. So I got in touch with Govardhana Prabhu, and here we are. I'd love to hear his story. I mean, he told me a little bit about it, but I'm just really intrigued by his story because he left for around 10 years and now is back and has created actually a temple in Portland, Oregon, Portland Bhakti Center. We'll give you the link for that Facebook page and Instagram and everything at the end. But I'd love to hear more about your story. So let's just talk a little bit about when did you get in touch with Krishna Consciousness initially?
So I first came in contact with Krishna Consciousness around 88, 89.
Oh, wow.
In Miami, where I grew up. Do you want the story or?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so somehow or other we came to know about the Sunday feast. I'm not sure if I feel like we were approached by a random devotee on the street, and I think we were walking around. Like, again, this is high school, so we're walking around, probably stoned. And
is this a Coconut Grove temple?
Yeah, this is Coconut Grove. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
And I think he said, like, do you want some free food? And we do this on Sunday. So we went to the feast. And the first person I met was Tara Prabhu. I don't know if you're familiar with Tara. A lot of people know him.
Yeah, I think I know him.
And Tara was an expert preacher and immediately engaged me in service. Like, I didn't have money to donate for the Sunday feast. I was a high school kid. So he had me wash pots, and I thought I was getting one up on the devotees. Like, look at that. I'm getting away with eating a feast because, just by washing pots. Right. So I did that every weekend for, a couple months, and Tara would explain the philosophy to me. I got really into it. I mean, I remember the second I walked into the temple, I was immediately, almost like taken back. Like, everything was very familiar, the sounds, the sights, the smells.
Right.
And I just loved it. And so that was when I was still in high school. And I graduated high school, and I moved to Gainesville to go to college. I did like a week of college, and then
wow, a week.
Dropped out, traveled around for like a couple months, came back to Gainesville, and I was sitting in the plaza one day. Let me back up. So right at the same time that I was coming in contact with Krishna Consciousness, my older sister of 5 years was living in Gainesville, and she had been forced to do some community hours at the Krishna house.
Oh, wow.
She was like drinking or something publicly, so they made her do community hours, and she was a cinematography major. So she decided to do her project or senior thesis or whatever.
Yeah.
Did a documentary on the devotees.
Wow. So
I had already discovered Krishna Consciousness. I was getting into it. She came out with this awesome video. Back then, in Gainesville, you had like Anutama was living there. Daru Brahma was the temple president.
Oh,
so there were interviews with everyone. Hridayananda Maharaj, because in Miami at that time, I mean, Miami was killer. Everyone was living there. Hridayananda Maharaj, I think, was living there permanently. There's just so many devotees. So she had made the video, and that got me really, enthusiastic. And I was a hardcore kid, but I had never heard of Shelter yet, like
Right.
I was more into like the earlier hardcore, like older, kind of punk stuff.
Okay.
And I was familiar with Youth of Today. I just never heard of Shelter. So a hardcore friend of mine, I told him I was getting into this Krishna thing. He played me Sharanagati, this Shelter
Oh,
song,
nice. Yes, I know that song.
and it blew me away. And it was like further validation, like everything that I was getting into, that was all right, because there were, hardcore kids getting into that. Anyways, fast forward to 92. I was in Gainesville, and I was in the plaza one day having lunch, and I asked Daru, I think we were playing Frisbee. That was like a thing that they always did. And I said, how do I do this, full time? Like what? And he said, just come tonight. And so I came with nothing. I just, like I think I gave everything away, moved into the temple, and within, a half hour, I'm shaved up, wearing saffron. And
Wow.
yeah, and then, kind of the rest is history. I started a relatively long career of being a full-time devotee.
How long were you a full-time devotee for?
So throughout the entire 90s, and like early 2000s. So I left. I was a full-time devotee in one form or other. I was either a traveling brahmachari, living in the temples, and then eventually I was like a married, temple grihasta,
Yeah.
either living in the temples or, deeply involved in the temples. And that was up till 2011.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So you had just basically you had surrendered like everything until 90 to 2011.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as to say I was surrendered, but I was there. I was, I was going through the motions.
Surrendered in the sense you also told me you spent a year in Germany at the farm being a pujari, even though you didn't think of yourself as a pujari. So surrendered in the sense of that kind of old time devotee attitude that whatever the authority tells me to do, I'm going to do that.
Right. Yeah. I was definitely at the mercy of, my temple authorities. I was a temple authority at one point too, and, not a great one. So, but yeah, that was the training then, is basically, any idea you have other than what, you're being required to do.
Yeah.
It's my end. We were actually just having this conversation yesterday. I was talking with a couple people at the center at the Portland Bhakti Center. I think when I joined, there was no in between. You were either full-time temple devotee, 16 rounds, 4 regular principles, engaged all day, or you were in Maya. It wasn't
right.
You couldn't live outside and chant 16 rounds, it was, so yeah, it was very much if I don't stay in the temple or stay connected to the temple, then it's pointless.
Tell us a little bit about the breakdown from in your in the full-time devotee time you were there until 2011. Break it down a little bit about where you were and what you were doing. So for example, when you started and then all the way till the end.
So when I first joined, I was in Gainesville only a couple months, doing Krishna feast every day. And then this Sankirtan party came through town called the Sunshine Sankirtan Party. It was run by Rasananda Prabhu, who was Rasananda Swami at the time. And, they were just enthusiastic, traveling Sankirtan devotees. So I joined that. And that was, traveling Sankirtan around the country, cold showers in the van, that kind of thing. And then we ended up in New Orleans. I don't know how much I can reveal on the show. This show is primarily for devotees, right?
It's mostly for devotees. Yeah. You can say what you want.
So I think around 93, something like that, 93, 94, we ended up in New Orleans, just passing through, and New Orleans was in complete chaos at that time. Something had happened. The temple president at the time, Chaturbahu Prabhu, had been murdered, not by devotees.
Wow.
But so everything was falling apart. Everything was in shambles. And I ended up staying there. I really liked the temple. I like the deities.
Yeah.
So I stayed in New Orleans for a bit, maybe like a year. Then I ended up in Potomac, Maryland. I always lived at temples where there was great association. You know, I mean, I lived in Potomac when Mukunda Maharaj and I think Garuda Prabhu were both there.
A long time ago.
Yeah, I lived. Anyways, after Potomac, I think I traveled around a little bit. Ended up in North Carolina, in Hillsborough, and lived there for a bit. And then, anyways, over time, ended up in Berkeley, where I met my first guru. I say my first guru because my first guru fell down, and
Right.
so or fell down. He's actually still a pretty great devotee. He's just not a guru anymore. But
Right.
So from Berkeley, I joined his party. I traveled just with him in like a Volkswagen van for a year. He sent me to Taiwan eventually to like help raise money for this ashram in Vrindavan, like selling paintings and just doing all kinds of random devotee pics,
Right.
So I lived there, eventually I got married. It was like an arranged marriage.
I see.
I got married and we were married for 13 years. At one point we were both sent to Germany to serve as Lord Nrsingadev's pujaris at the German farm.
Yeah.
A couple times in between we had either moved out, we were living like outside the temple and helping out at the temple. So we were kind of back and forth, like most Grahastas experiences before they fully move out of the temple. They're kind of in limbo.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it. So I had, and in Germany, I mean, that was also some great association. There were some pretty like amazing devotees there. And eventually ending up in Portland.
Okay.
I was sent to Eugene, Oregon for a time.
Yeah.
To open up a temple there, which we had, I think, for like a year or two, and then our yatra was constantly moving, and constantly like opening up centers and recruiting devotees. So there was really no like long-term place for me yet.
Right. And then so you got initiated by this first guru, and then he fell down or whatever happened, and then you got reinitiated.
Yeah.
And then it was shortly, I remember us talking a little bit earlier, you kind of left Krishna Consciousness after the second time you got initiated.
Right. So in hindsight, I'm not even sure why I got initiated again. I guess I thought that was like a necessary step.
Right.
So that your guru be in good standing with ISKCON, but I think I don't necessarily think that's the case. I mean, I was connected to the parampara, but regardless, I had a long-term relationship with my current guru because I had lived at his temple in North Carolina for a while.
Right.
As a brahmachari, and he was our GBC at the time. So when our guru left, he was sent in to clean up the mess. And I think I was on the temple board or whatever at the time. So I was dealing with him a lot directly. And I just said, hey, why don't I take reinitiation from you? Like, we're already friends, And he said, of course, that makes sense. So I was initiated pretty quickly after my first guru left. And then I didn't leave right away. I think it was actually, now that I think about it, I think it was still like 5 or 6 years or something. I don't remember exactly when.
Oh, I see.
Left, but it was a few years.
Right.
But by that time I was living outside of the temple. I'm back from Germany, and I'm working and I'm trying to be, trying to maintain ourselves. And so it was a few years after my second time getting initiated.
Yeah.
That I just decided to leave.
Tell us a little bit about your thought process and like what led to that. Like, because sometimes I think, devotees don't necessarily like make that in their minds are like, okay, like today I'm a devotee, and then tomorrow it's like, okay, I'm not a devotee anymore.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes it's like a gradual thing. Sometimes it's like, okay, you just lose the association of devotees and you don't kind of relate with that anymore. Like, tell us a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, I think it was a combination. I mean, it definitely happened gradually. You know, it's not like I woke up one day and I'm like, I'm done with this. And I could blame it on a bunch of external circumstances, but ultimately,
yeah,
when all is said and done, I just wasn't surrendered to Krishna, right? But the circumstances surrounding my decision were, so the fall down first of my first guru was very damaging to our community here in Portland, and actually all over the world. Like we had, we were developing a pretty large yatra by that time, and we were giving it our all. Like we were really committed to our, even though, in retrospect, I could see the problems pretty clear as day, why my guru would leave. He admittedly like wasn't following the principles. He wasn't chanting. But we had dedicated our lives to this guy who was, as good as God. And he was, he was telling us to do all these things, to follow the principles, to chant Hare Krishna, at the same time criticizing other devotees that I felt inspired by. Right. I had some pretty great association early on. So, I was at Gita Nagari for a bit, working with cows, with, in Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj's association. I had met, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, like all these great devotees that I was inspired by. But when I met my guru, he had like criticized all these devotees. And so, our party was very much like our camp versus the rest of everyone. What to speak of non-ISKCON? Like, I mean, my good friend in Miami, who I discovered Krishna Consciousness with, he became a disciple of Narayan Maharaj early on. But I was taught, no, we don't support Narayan Maharaj, and I thought Narayan Maharaj was great. So anyway, we had given up all our preconceptions, whatever, and surrendered to this guru. And then when he had his fall from grace, it like ripped apart our congregation. I remember there were a couple devotees here who were running the temple, and they were just working like day in, day out, cooking everything, doing everything. And our guru came and just like, no appreciation. No, he was like, all right, I'm going to take all the devotees. We had a bus at the time, like a Greyhound bus. And he like took all the devotees from our temple, went traveling and just left us all hanging. Anyway, so when he eventually, gave up his position as guru, our congregation here fell apart. Some devotees left completely. Some devotees went back to Germany. We had a lot of like international devotees here, some German devotees, some Bosnian devotees. They had returned to where they are. Some devotees, like you mentioned, Nityananda Chandra Prabhu, some devotees like him went to Dallas to be part of like an established large congregation. And the Grahastas who were here, myself and a few others, we were just kind of left with like nothing. There was no party, no temple. The closest temple was the Hillsborough temple that exists now, Hillsborough, Oregon, not North Carolina. And that's like an hour away. And even that was like in its startup stage. And so there was just nothing for us to do. And, for myself personally, I didn't intend to leave. I mean, I wouldn't have become a devotee if I wanted to not be a devotee. But I was just starting my time, working on being a grahasta and being, trying to be successful and provide for my family. Yeah. And I think just over time and with the validation of my first guru leaving, that, okay, well, he left. And so where's the point in me even trying if like my own guru didn't even succeed? I think that was my mentality, it's like, well, what's the point? I've been doing this now 20 years and where am I at? I'm still, struggling. I'm not, and at the same time, some things had bothered me. Like when I was in Germany, for example, one of my co-pujaris was a gay devotee. And, you know, I was encouraging him, like, you should come out, like, what, be yourself, you know?
Yeah.
I'm a very liberal person. And he did. And they like made him get married to a lady.
Oh gosh.
You know, then they kind of like shunned him a little, and he left completely, like totally fried. I just saw so many people getting fried, and I was starting to wonder, like, why, if this is such a great, beautiful thing, that, you know, what's wrong? Why is everyone leaving? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, even through the stuff, because I experienced a lot of like, you know, negative things, I think, in the early mid 90s in ISKCON. I mean, a lot of more great things, obviously. But, you know, there was definitely some stuff that was going on. And I had persevered through that. But I think with the ultimate, you know, fall down of my guru, it was kind of like, all right, well, I don't need this, you know. And I had started working, I'd started experiencing some material success for my first time, you know, which I didn't know was in me. I didn't know that I had, because I was never allowed to like do that kind of thing in the temple. I just did whatever they told me to do. Always like improperly engaged too. Like I'm not a book distributor. I'm not designed for that, but I did it. You know, I love deities, but I'm not a pujari by nature. You know, it's just not my thing. So I think when I started, you know, taking control of my own, and I started experiencing some success, I think I rationalized that I don't need Krishna anymore. Like, I'm doing all this, you know, and, you know, Krishna is the intelligence in man, right? So I think he gave me that facility to like forget him, you know, like, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to forget about Krishna and not be, you know, because as I moved out of the temple and you know, was trying to be a grahasta, being a devotee in one sense, it was always a challenge to like do what non-devotees were doing, you know, to be engaged in, you know, material endeavors and everything, but almost like hide the fact that I'm a devotee, you know, like hide my sika, or like chant on my lunch break or whatever, you know. And so then I just figured, okay, well, I don't have to do any of this, and you know, kind of no harm, no foul, mistakenly. But, and so I think just as Krishna, you know, is our power, like when we're fixed up and when we're focused on Krishna, like he gives us that intelligence to serve him. But the same could be said the other way, you know. I mean, man disposes, God, or man proposes, God disposes, right? So I think I wanted to leave, and so Krishna gave me that facility.
The position of guru holds so much, in the sense of like, if you lose faith in someone like that, it can just be so violently harmful to someone's life,
Right.
to someone's Krishna consciousness. So it boggles my mind how you know, I mean, ISKCON throughout the years, the 80s and 90s. I mean, you went through that. Just the position of guru, and the gurus who couldn't continue their service as a guru or as the principals or whatever it was. It just like, it's like the collateral damage is like crazy, especially if someone was very, very influential and they had a lot of huge following and things like that. So that's,
absolutely.
but it's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because you had already gotten initiated by someone else, but that still stuck with you from your first guru.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't even know if, you know, after I had gotten initiated the second time, I think I had already become pretty lax in my practice, you know. I mean,
right,
I was chanting and everything, but I think I had already initiated the sequence that would follow of,
right,
you know, kind of losing faith. And because the way I was trained up, you know, by this particular guru, was to find fault in a lot of great devotees, you know.
right,
And that sets you up for failure. I mean, aparad, you know, it
right,
can't really fight that. And you know, so And yeah, you're right about the focus on guru, and that was always a huge thing. Like when I remember when I first was going to the Miami temple, there was still like the zonal acharya Vyasasan in the temple room,
Oh my gosh.
right? Which was like reserved for whoever it was. I think it was
Right.
for Maharaj.
Right.
And you know, when I was a new brahmachari, like the Kirtanananda thing was just starting out with him being, you know, prosecuted for various things. And at the same time, I had all these, you know, I was the same age as a lot of Gurukulis who were born in the 70s, and they were coming out, and you know, they were still very, they were like, every temple I went to, there were parties of Gurukulis who would come through, but they would like, you know, badmouth or, you know, something like, they would talk about their experiences growing up in it, and they weren't favorable experiences. And so I definitely had some things working against me. And then when I met, so I, you know, all these gurus that I had experienced over the years, again, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, Gaur Govinda Swami, like were great. And then I met my first guru, and it was like, okay, yeah, all those people that you met, they're lame, you know. And
Wow.
And then I started seeing gurus falling down, other people's gurus falling down. And my thought was always, wow, I'm so glad that I'm properly situated with like a fixed up guru, you know, Prabhupada man. That was always his thing, you know, Prabhupada man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then when he left, sure, it was completely devastating. But at the same time, it's, you know, it's validation for any Maya that you're already in, you know.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like so your guru did it, so you can do it.
Now your wife at the time, what was her like attitude towards everything? Was she going through the same things that you were, or were you guys sharing this feeling?
Yeah. So I had actually, while my guru was still in good standing when we were living in Germany, I had actually brought up to her that I felt as if, you know, something was off, and she wasn't feeling that. She was like, she got really mad at me, you know, because I wanted to reject our guru, you know. And so whatever. So we stuck with it. And but yeah, when the whole thing happened and it all went down, I mean, she was fried, you know. She stuck with it with me, you know, after that fall down. She didn't take reinitiation, but she has a good relationship with my guru. And you know, she was taking instruction from him, but she didn't feel it necessary to take reinitiation. But she was completely fried, and still to this day, like she's fried. I mean, you know, she was also, I mean, her experience in Krishna Consciousness was different than mine. We met, I actually made her a devotee. We met on the street in Berkeley, and I was a brahmachari, and I had preached to her in People's Park. And yeah, I invited her to the Sunday feast, and she came and never left. And she was actually 17 at the time too. And the temple had to get like permission from her father. Like, you know, he had to sign something.
Wow.
So she moved in, and for a few years she was like a brahmacharini. You know, she was in Hawaii for a bit, here and there, and she didn't have a great experience as many women, you know, in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
ISKCON didn't. And you know, she took initiation from the same guru, and she was one brahmacharini in a house of like 20 brahmacharis, you know, or something. And it was, you know, 20 brahmacharis who had just joined, you know, and you know, they became her authority, and, you know, so she didn't have a great experience to begin with as a early on as a devotee. And then, yeah, I think with the fall down of our guru, she was done, you know, she's fried, and you can't blame her.
So then after you left, you told me that you opened like 100 businesses and you were an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about that, because I find that very interesting, because I personally am interested in entrepreneurship, but to hear your story, I mean, we're still getting to the end of the story, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think I always had that when, like, for example, when I was a young, like, hardcore kid, I made zines. If you know what zines are, like
Right.
hand drawn magazines, and I organized shows and stuff. I was really into like making stuff happen.
So you had this like Vaishya kind of real Vaishya
Yeah,
bhav.
for sure, Vaishya
Yeah.
Kshatriya, yeah.
Right.
And so I had that propensity. I remember actually even at our temple here for a while, I wanted to open a gift shop. We didn't have one. And I thought that would be a good service for me, but that was shut down,
Yeah.
Anyway, so when I moved out, like a lot of devotees, I had no training in anything. I knew how to be a brahmachari, and I knew how to pry people out. So I worked random jobs, like every kind of job you could think of. And I went to barber school. Oh, well, I went into the military.
Oh, yeah. Kshatriya, yes. Tell us about that.
That's part of the timeline.
Yeah.
After Germany, this is kind of odd. So right after being a pujari for a year in Germany, which is like a very serene, mellow life. I mean, that's all I did was serve the deities. Moved back to America, and I was like, what do I do? Like, for a living, we're going to move out of the temple. We had moved to Seattle, and I opened up a free restaurant with Hari Vilas Prabhu, or Maharaj.
Yeah, Hari Vilas. Yeah, Hari Vilas.
Yeah. We opened up this like free restaurant together called My Sweet Lord, which is like a horrible name. But I can say that now as an expert in branding, that My Sweet Lord was not a good name for a restaurant. But we did that, but I wasn't making money. It was a free restaurant. Like,
yeah.
It's like the antithesis of what you should be doing with a restaurant.
Yeah.
So, and then I sold T-shirts like on the street for a devotee, like Seattle Space Needle T-shirts. Anyways, I met an army recruiter on the street once.
Okay.
And I had a godbrother at the time, Parthasarathi.
Yeah, I know him really well. I was just talking about you to him yesterday. He was like, "Oh, I remember him, and that's cool. I'd like to talk to him again." I told him to log on and watch. Cool. I hope he's watching right now.
Yeah. So he was a devotee in Germany. He would come to the temple all the time, and he was in the army. And he had a good experience in the army. So I met this recruiter. I came home to my wife. I said, "What do you think about me like joining the army? I don't know. It's something. It would guarantee us like income. I could go to school, yada yada." So I did that and joined the army. I went to Iraq for a year.
Wow.
Where I wrote a book about being a devotee in Iraq. They had posted excerpts of the book on Chakra back then.
Chakra back in the day.
Yeah. Which I think became Dandavats. Anyways, it was called Memoirs of a Modern Day Kshatriya, and it was just about my experience as a devotee in the army. So I did that, and when I was done with the army, I went to barber school.
Let's talk a little bit about the army, a little bit more in detail. So how? So something that boggles my mind. How does a devotee who's a vegetarian like live in an army? Because the whole concept and everything of war and things like it doesn't like jive well with like kind of like a Vaishnava lifestyle. So how did you do that?
I mean, it jived with Arjuna. So
right.
I mean, I had that question too. I think initially I was like, how do I reconcile like, the practice of ahimsa and nonviolence and all that with being a devotee? Right. And I think it was justified by doing your duty.
Yeah, right? Of course, yeah.
And our guru at the time, he supported Parthasarathi in the military, and he thought it was a good idea if I did it. So that's it, guru's blessings. And being there, like in Iraq, for example, it was extremely hard. The army didn't have an obligation at that time to accommodate your diet on a religious basis. And so it was either you eat, MREs, which are disgusting, or, I made friends with a couple people in the cafeteria, and I was able to like swindle some, iceberg lettuce and like peanut butter. So
Gosh.
actually, like for the entire year, all I ate was like salad and peanut butter and jelly. Pretty
Oh my
much for the whole
God.
year. I lost 60 pounds, and I'm already like a thin guy.
Oh my goodness.
Because you're walking around 120-degree heat, so you're gonna sweat all your weight out anyways. And then on top of that, I wasn't eating. And if there was ever a time that would have been acceptable for me to, to make some adjustments in my diet, it would have been then, right? But
Yeah, of
I
course.
didn't. I wouldn't do it. So it was pretty austere, and we slept. We lived in like we found this abandoned motor pool from that the Iraqi army used, and we built little like rooms in it. I mean, that's what we lived in. It was hell, man. It was hellish. It was like a
Wow.
hellish planet. Like there were like you had garbage burning pits all over the place, and it sucked. And you're living in so I think that lifestyle actually compounded on top of the strict lifestyle of being a Hare Krishna, monk.
Yeah.
It was a lot. I mean, there's a lot of discipline in both, which is good and bad. I mean, it didn't work out for me at the time because I have an independent streak and I'm rebellious by nature, but
Yeah.
but it gave me great structure and like an insane work ethic. But you're being mistreated in both, right? I mean, I was certainly at times mistreated in the Hare Krishna movement by bhakti leaders and stuff like that. And you're definitely mistreated in the military. You have all these silly. I had joined a little older. I was like 27 when I went in, but I have all these like 21-year-old kids who
Yeah.
are like my superiors.
Wow.
So, anyways, it wasn't the life for me.
So after 1 year of doing that, and you came back and you went to barber school.
No, I was in for more than a year.
Oh, okay.
I was in Iraq for a year. I was in war.
Oh, okay, okay. So then when you came back, you were kind of like a civilian, like you were doing army things, but you were staying at home, or how's that working?
Yeah, no, I was still in the army, but
Yeah.
I was stationed outside of Seattle.
I see. Okay.
So then I got out of the army, and I was trying to work for no, I was working in Seattle doing the t-shirts and everything before the army.
Okay.
So when I got out of the military, that I went straight to barber school. Yeah. Because I was like, what can I use? What's a skill that I can use everywhere? And I had always done, like when I was in high school, I always cut everyone's hair. Like I would fade people's hair up, and I rolled with like, I was a hardcore kid, but I also rolled with like hip hop kids, and like I wrote graffiti and stuff. And so we were always like fading our hair, stuff like that. So I knew how to do it. And so I went to barber school, and I did really well at that. I did like competitions and stuff in school, and I always won the competitions.
Wow.
Same thing in the military. Like when I went into the military, like I graduated as the distinguished honor grad in the technical training. And anyway, so I went to barber school, did all that. Went to work for a barber shop for a couple years or a few years, and then I opened a shop of my own. I had a pretty large clientele by that time. I had been working and managing this shop for a few years, and so I just took a chance and opened up. I mean, saved up like 10 grand, and I opened up like a little one chair, tiny little like 200 square foot sliver of a building.
Wow.
And I did that, and I opened that up, and it was immediately successful. Like I had a large clientele. There wasn't really anything in Portland at the time because I was living back in Portland. There wasn't any like barber scene, it hadn't really hit yet. That there was a famous HBO show, Boardwalk Empire. If you remember that show.
Yeah.
That had just hit, and the trends were starting to follow. So people were starting to do these like, old school, like 1940s look.
Right.
And I wrote to Boardwalk Empire, and I told them that the stuff they did in the first season, it wasn't periodically correct, and that I knew about this and I could help them. And I got a gig like consulting on that show.
Oh, wow.
And when I did that, the Oregonian, the local paper, they did an article on me, and my shop just took off. It was, so after a couple years, I was booked for like months, and
For haircuts.
yeah, and
Amazing.
shaves. We were doing like traditional,
Okay.
straight razor shaves and stuff.
Right.
I was booked up for months, and I couldn't like accommodate any new customers. So I moved up the street to a larger space, started hiring people.
Yeah.
But the same thing happened. We blew up, and so
Wow.
after a couple more years, I decided to open a second location on the other side of town to accommodate those people.
Wow.
And then it kind of went like that. Every couple years, I just opened up another shop, so I ended up with this chain of barbershops.
How many were
I
there?
had like five shops across Oregon, like outside of Portland too.
Uh-huh.
And that just led to, I should add, my first business actually before the barbershops, while I was working and managing that one barber shop, I had a food cart, like a vegan food cart. And the food cart scene hadn't really taken off here yet, so it didn't do that great. But it got my fingers wet, or whatever, my toes wet, or whatever that expression is.
Yeah.
But it gave me the taste, and it showed me I had to work for myself. So, anyways, 5 barbershops later, then I just started getting into other things, So I had a couple of restaurants. I got into I got remarried, and I'm divorced again, but my second wife was a tattoo artist, so we opened up a tattoo shop together. And then I just went on. I was involved in, I didn't own 100 businesses, but I was certainly involved in them. Like
Right.
I think there was a time in Portland, maybe 5 years ago, where you would have been hard pressed to find a business that I wasn't somehow or other connected to.
Like an investor or advisor or something.
Yeah. So I started consulting with people, for startups and everything. I invested in a couple of businesses. But yeah, so by the end of it all, I had, some restaurants, some barbershops, a tattoo shop. I had a motorcycle repair shop.
Cool.
I was the COO of a bioplastics company that I helped found.
Wow.
Yeah, I just had a lot of random things. And then I sold, along the way, I was selling businesses too, so
I see.
So then it was kind of like, I had this success that I had never experienced, and I did it. I was the controller.
Yes.
My mentality, so I completely just forgot at all about Krishna Consciousness. Like it didn't even enter my mind. And if it did, if I talked with people about it, it wasn't in the most positive light. I'm going to be honest. Like,
yeah, of course.
So yeah.
So that's amazing. So you had all this material success, and tell us a little bit about. I mean, you don't have to, but like
I will.
Your wife, who was the devotee, that just kind of fizzled out. Like 13 years you had been married. I assume you had children, and so it just kind of.
Yeah, we have three children. It fizzled out. Well, like how our marriage ended.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, you guys wanted to go different ways, and
our common ground was Krishna consciousness. That's
right.
The only thing. That's really what we had in common.
Right.
It's not like we were arranged by our nature. I mean,
yes.
I was a punk rock hardcore kid, and she was like a hippie, and we were very different natures. And so but our connection was Krishna consciousness. So then when we because we had both decided to kind of step away from it.
Yeah.
So then when we were living just as non-devotees, you know, like what was our common ground besides our kids?
Right.
You know, and our marriage, because again, you know, Christian conscious marriage in the 90s, like our guru was like, you know, he's in charge, you know. I was supposed to be like running the show, and I wasn't the nicest guy, you know, and that was just what was normal for us. Like that's what we saw in Christian, you know, in relationships at that time. So we always had like a little bit of a rocky marriage. But you know, we stayed together because of Krishna and because of the kids. And then eventually we were just both really unhappy. And I was like, we're not doing any favors for the kids staying together. Like they don't want to see us like this.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, so we split up. It was a pretty ugly divorce for, you know, now we're friends, and we actually live like a block away apart. So
wow.
our kids go back and forth, you know.
Wow.
But yeah, that was it. And I wanted to make up for lost time. You know, like I missed my entire 20. I didn't miss, you know, I had a good experience overall in Christian consciousness. I'm not blaming Christian consciousness for my leaving, but I wanted to make up for lost time, man. I wanted to be 20 again, you know. So I did. I dated and this and that, and you know, I did my business, and you know, I got back into a lot of things I had been into. I was already relatively like heavily tattooed for when I joined. Like for that time, I had like a sleeve, and that was like pretty extreme. You know, and then with my second marriage, you know, owning a tattoo shop, I got really into that whole culture.
Right.
I ended up getting tons of tattoos, which now I have like, you know, no use for. But yeah, I think if we hadn't left Christian consciousness, you know, we would have probably been in a different place altogether, because you know, we couldn't have justified getting divorced because it's not part of our philosophy, you know. But I think not having that barrier, not having that like restriction of being a devotee, like we could do whatever we want. And our marriage just didn't work out.
So then when did you kind of feel like, what was the beginning of the return? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's jumping forward quite, you know, 10 years, but
but in those 10 years, it was mostly you were very much within your business and your family and things like that, right?
I was antithetical to Christian consciousness. I mean, even when I would talk about it, like I talked to my ex-wife a couple times. I'm like, what do you think about, like, do you ever think about it? Do you still believe in any, you know, we would have those talks, or I'd meet other like former devotees, and we'd have those conversations.
Yeah.
My whole thing was, I had become, you know, I didn't hate Christian consciousness as a philosophy. I didn't like the movement for some time. That's a fact. But, and that's, you know, largely because of things that had happened over the years, bureaucracy, just mismanagement, and, you know, gurus and all this, like, but the philosophy itself, I mean, you know, I questioned some of it when I was out of it. You know, you know, as your usual, like, how can this be the one true path? And I still actually feel that. I mean, I don't believe that we're the way, but so I think it had even gotten to the point, I don't think I ever like didn't believe in like God. But it was definitely like, I remember saying this to a few people, like, yeah, whether God exists or not, I don't know. It just doesn't matter to me either way. You know, it just didn't matter. And I believe that it didn't matter to God, you know, that like he doesn't need us. And, you know, and I remember saying several times, like I went once to the temple here in Hillsborough. I think I was in the area. I just stopped by randomly just for a visit. And I was talking to the temple president. I remember telling him once that, you know, he was like, oh, it's okay. You know, Krishna Krishna, you know, he's still there. He'll take you back when you're ready. And I was like, I don't need your like consolation. Like I don't feel bad about where I'm at, and I don't have any intention of becoming a devotee again. I had no intention of becoming a devotee.
Wow.
Anyways, so fast
It
forward.
it wasn't because of your material success and because you thought Krishna doesn't need me. There was no relate, like it wasn't relevant in your life at the moment to think about God or to do anything like that.
Right, it wasn't relevant. I think in a lot of ways, you know, living in the temples or serving the military or whatever, it filled some void that I needed filled, right? I needed either the structure or, you know, the discipline. And, you know, and philosophically, I believed it. I mean, I felt from day one when I first walked into that Miami temple that that's where I was supposed to be, you know? So, but yeah, I think when I was out of it, I think it was largely due to material success. I said, well, I've got everything I need now.
Yeah.
You know, and no one helped me to get it. So
it was all done by you.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. And it was easier to reject Krishna consciousness because I could do what I want. I could, you know, I could party, like, you know, if I wanted to have a drink or something, like no big deal. Like, well, I don't have any responsibility to anyone.
Yeah.
And so I think I further justified it like that. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And so then, you know, for the past couple years from now, you know, the past couple years, I was really starting to consider again, like, you know, what do I believe like about God? And like, I wasn't into Krishna consciousness. I had no plan of going back there, but you know, when I really thought about it philosophically, it wasn't rational that there would be no God. It just doesn't make sense. You know, I mean, the proof is all around us. So, I'd get really turned off, like when I would see people on social media, for example. It's pretty trendy these days to be like anti-God and anti-religion. You know, I mean, you have these T-shirts that I see people wearing that say, you know, no gods, no masters. Like it's like funny and cool to diss religion, you know, and it's super cliche to, you know, everyone blames religion on everything. Oh, all the wars in the world were started because of religion, which actually isn't the case. You know, I mean, certainly there have been wars based on religion, but I don't think that's the cause of all the wars. But and I feel these people. I mean, I have problem with religion for those reasons too. I mean, you know, the dogma and the hypocrisy and all that.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense to me that there wouldn't be a God. You know, that just doesn't resonate with me. But I didn't feel the need to do anything about it. I decided, okay, well, I believe that there's God, but you know, I don't believe that we have an obligation one way or the other. We're not affected by that. So that was kind of my rationale for the last couple years of me not being a devotee. And then what was your other question?
So then how did you start kind of thinking, like, I mean, what you are now is like, oh, you've opened up a center and you're like very much back into it. But how did it kind of start? How did your
resurfacing?
Yeah, resurfacing. How did that happen?
Okay, so in the beginning of COVID, so there, anyways, in the beginning of COVID, there was a girl I had dated, you know, a couple years ago for like a week. She had posted something on Facebook, like, you know, I don't know if you noticed, but in the beginning of COVID, everyone was starting to like call people out for everything, you know, like, you know, cancel culture was there, and
yes,
you know, everyone was being called out. So, you know, this girl had gone on Facebook or something, and she was like, oh, you know, there's this guy in town, and you know, everyone seems to like him and you know, respect him, and you know, I was fairly well known in town, you know, for my businesses and stuff.
Yeah.
She was, you know, so she posted like basically like he was a jerk to me, and but what happened was several people from my past who I had had interactions with, either people I had dated or people I fired, in jobs, basically like a handful of people that I had negative interactions with in the past, they kind of all joined in on that post.
wow.
And they were like, calling me out for being,
Oh my gosh.
they were saying like, all right, he hasn't been like, physically or sexually abusive or anything, but like emotionally and mentally abusive. Right.
Right.
And, I got defensive about it at first. I was like, oh, these people need to, focus on their own life or whatever. But it started circulating around, and it kind of became a big thing. I got called out, and I was afraid that people were going to like boycott my businesses, like my reputation was going to be ruined. I lost friends and stuff like that. And I started realizing that, to be upset with the people that were calling me out wasn't the right mentality to have. I mean, I was being called out because I had displayed like, toxic behaviors in the past. I think that was all part of, becoming that like entrepreneur, and, and being, at one point I had like, over 100 employees simultaneously, and I'm an East Coaster, so I'm already kind of like, aggressive, and I realized that I'd become a jerk, over the years. And I was mistreating people, and I was I was manipulating people, and just kind of just like being a horrible person, and it threw me into this like deep depression for a couple months. Life was really hard, even to the point where I've never struggled with like mental health issues. I've always considered myself pretty balanced, and
Yeah.
I got really depressed. I mean, even, to the point where I was like, I had thought about suicide for a second. Like I wouldn't do it.
Wow.
But I was just like, man, I'm a real jerk and no one likes me. And
This was because of this post, and because people were kind of questioning good reputation and everything.
Yeah, the post was the catalyst, and then
Yeah.
I just started looking at like all my past relationships, my previous marriage, and I was like, man, I'm like not a good person, I felt pretty bad. And I think in a moment of desperation, because I was like, I felt like, the whole world had crumbled, and I was losing everything.
Wow.
And it was taking a toll on my partners. She was having, her friends are texting her every day. Hey, are you okay? Are you being mistreated? It was like, and it kind of blew up from, and I'm not minimizing what I did, because, I haven't been a good guy to people, but it blew up like really big. And I was like, all right, you don't need to check on my partner to see if she's being treated okay. It's not like, the things I was being called out for was basically being a big a-hole,
Right.
And she already knows that. But anyway, so one day, I was sitting there, and I was, by this point, this had all followed like a couple month period of me really contemplating like what I believe, and deciding that, okay, well, I do believe in God, and what am I going to do about that? Like, if I believe in God, and if I understand this position of God, like, I can't just keep going on doing what I'm doing. I have to change my life. Then this whole thing happened.
Oh, I see.
And I remembered when I first met my current guru, one of the first things he told me was that, if Krishna likes you, he gives you everything you want. But if he loves you, he takes everything from you. I didn't understand that at the time. And I never understood that my whole life as a devotee. Finally, it really made a lot of sense to me that, I definitely felt God's hand in this. Like, if I'm ever gonna get out of this place, I need to lose my attachment to it. And I certainly did, like overnight, you know. And
Wow.
anyway, so it kind of in a moment of desperation, I just, you know, I started meditating one day for like a couple hours, and I was sitting there and I was, you know, meditating, and I started to pray, and not to Krishna, you know, again, Krishna was not in my mind at this time.
Meditating, you're just sitting quietly, and
I was sitting there quietly, and I started praying, and I was, you know, I was trying to do like a formal prayer, like, oh Lord, something. And then I just started talking, like I'm talking to you.
yeah.
Started having this like conversation with God, and completely against any of my intention, I just started chanting the Maha Mantra.
Wow.
Like spontaneously. And I chanted, you know, for like an hour. I sat and I chanted. It was one of the best mantra japa sessions I've had in my life. Like it was the you know, I was super intent on it, and I immediately felt relieved. And Krishna, you know, he revealed himself to me in that way, that like, and he and more than that, revealed kind of what I needed to do, that like he wasn't done with me. And, you know, again, I had no desire to be a devotee up until that point. I had no desire to be a devotee. And then by the end of that kind of prayer and chanting session, I was like, man, yeah, you know, Krishna won't let me go, you know, and what am I going to do about it? Like, I can't just keep living this life. You know, some of the businesses I had weren't even in line with like our principles. I had a bar, you know,
Right.
so I kept it from everyone. I didn't tell anyone, except I reached out to my guru, who I hadn't talked to in 10 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I reached out to him. I said, hey, you know, this is what's going on. I'd like to come back to Krishna Consciousness, but some things are going to be different for me. Like, for example, our relationship, I think, is going to be different. You know, I can't view you in the same light as maybe I did in the past, you know?
Yeah.
I mentioned it I talked to my ex-wife about it, because she you know, she had been a devotee. Like, at this point, I had no devotees in my life. Who am I going to talk to? You know, I didn't even talk to my partner about it.
Right. I want to pause you for a second.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about when you said you just started to chant, and those are one of the best japa sessions.
Yeah.
I find that so fascinating that you were kind of stripped of all your kind of facades that you had, as far as you weren't, you know, you were a devotee, you know, in the, when you were a brahmachari and all that stuff. No one told you to chant. No, you weren't chanting for anyone else. You weren't, there was no
not only that, I was chanting against my own desire.
And that kind of chanting is like the most sincere, because you're just chanting for the sake of chanting. But in your case, I mean, you didn't even choose to; it just came to you. But for what I like to tell my listeners is something that is like, when you have to understand what your motivations are when you chant. It's like the most pure kind of motivated chanting is like when no one is telling you to do it. You're not obligated to do it. It's just like a very spontaneous thing. Of course, we have our, you know, we promise our guru certain things and things like that, like our 16 rounds and all. But what I love about your story is that when you said that was your best kind of japa session, because it was just coming from a place of like, it was just coming from a very sincere place.
Yeah, it was. It almost like spilled out of my mouth. Like, so when I started chanting, it was because I had opened my mouth to say something else in this conversation I was having with God.
Right.
I think I went to say something like, you know, whatever, some sentence, and I opened my mouth, and it was like, oh, Hare Krishna, you know, like shot out of me, and I was like, what is this? But but you're right. You know, I never had, you know, like a taste for chanting necessarily. Like, I love kirtan, and I've always been like a kirtaniya, you know, but but you know, with personal japa, I mean, I did it because that was my obligation. People, you know, someone told me I have to do this, you know, 16 times a day, and so I did it. You know, but it was never like coming from the heart, you know.
Yeah.
And this japa session was not like anything I had ever experienced. You know, it was
So beautiful.
I didn't you know, even when I was like praying and talking with God, it wasn't Krishna. It wasn't like, you know, I wasn't envisioning like Krishna, like a blue guy with a flute. Like I was just, you know, I wasn't really envisioning anything, but I was just like talking to God. And yeah, when I started chanting, it was almost like the conversation had gone to the next level. Like that japa session was a conversation in itself, you know, and the Maha Mantra was like revealing a lot to me. And
Wow.
and it was pretty amazing. And it came out of nowhere, and it was the first time I really have felt like an attachment to chanting and seen the strength of it. Obviously, you know, living in the temples, I had periods of time where I'd seen the strength of chanting, but this was like just super like real and raw to me.
Real and raw. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost like you had to go through all the 10 years that you left to come to this point where you were able to purely and sincerely appreciate it at that very moment. That makes it, like, in my eyes, that makes it worth it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely took the level of, you know, distance I had created between myself and the movement to come back to the movement, because you know I joined I joined voluntarily, obviously, but I think a lot of the reason I stayed in the movement, even you know, towards the end when I was pretty lax in my own practice, was because I had been so indoctrinated with like the outside world is horrible and it's everyone's Maya, you know. And so if you move out of the temple, you know, like I said in the beginning of this interview, like it was all or nothing back then. It was you're either living in the temple and doing your thing, or you're in Maya, you know. And I wanted to be kept out of, you know, now I see you can live outside and you could be just as Krishna conscious. I mean, I feel like now, you know, Krishna consciousness is a lot more real to me, you know. I'm doing it because I want to do it, you know. And
yeah, exactly.
no one's telling me how to practice, you know. And anyway, so when I made the decision that, okay, I'm going to get back into this, I spent a couple of weeks contemplating like, how am I going to properly engage myself? Because if I want to stay in this movement, like I have to act according to my nature. And that was never a thing I did when I was in the temple, you know. Like,
Right.
Again, I'm not a book distributor. I've never been a proselytizer. Like I want you to, you know, chant Hare Krishna, but I'm not going to like beat it into you, you know.
Right.
You know, and you know, I did some cow protection. That's nice. That, you know, that's kind of according to my nature now. But I mean, when I lived in the temple, I was a city preacher, you know, and I wanted to just do like college preaching and stuff. And, you know, pujari life, like that's not me. I'm like, you know, I'm not an introvert, and I'm not like, I mean, I love deities. That whole thing's great.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't my nature. I was never engaged according to my nature. So I started thinking about it, and I'm like, how do I, you know, how do I do this? Like, what do I use? Like, what are my talents and my skills and my interests, you know?
So this is what you were thinking after you contacted your guru after 10 years, and now your thought process was like, how do you fit into Krishna conscious, or how does Krishna conscious fit into your life again, but this time in a more real and then like kind of more way that's comfortable?
Yeah. So my first conversation with my guru, I said, you know, I'm coming back to this. I own a restaurant. It's not like conducive to, you know, practicing Krishna consciousness. There's karma involved in there.
Yeah.
What should I do? Do I, you know, so I ended up selling it. And at the same time, I sold my barbershops, but that was just completely coincidental. I had already been in talks to sell my shops.
You sold all of them?
Yeah, mainly because, for one, I had that fear that, you know, my shops weren't going to do well now that I had been called out, and my
Oh,
reputation was going to be, so
see.
I started thinking like, how do I secure myself for the future?
Yeah.
So I had sold my shop. So basically, I was left with like one restaurant, which I still have now. It's a vegetarian Jewish deli.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
That's interesting.
But anyways, I started thinking like, how do I properly engage myself? And what I've done in Portland over the past 13 years or so is build and brand businesses,
Yeah.
and I was very successful at that. So I said, all right, well, I have that propensity to, and the knowledge too, like the practical knowledge of how to start something, how to start and how to grow it. I have, because of my other businesses, I have some following or whatever. So, how can I engage all that in Krishna service? So, and we didn't have a temple here. So I said, all right, well, I should start a center as kind of my own personal debt of gratitude to Krishna for allowing me, because if anyone was not coming back to Krishna consciousness, it was me, and so, so I figured, all right, I've got the money, I've got the resources, I've got the time with the sale of my businesses and stuff, so I started looking. Initially, I was just looking for like a place that, we can gather. There's still a few devotees in town who, scattered around town who were disciples of my first guru, and they're like, walking on the edge of Krishna consciousness. So I was like, what if I just found a little place that, we could just meet once a week and chant? I started looking for that. And then because I'm kind of like a go big or go home type of guy, I just ended up like, I rented a place. I built out like a full commercial kitchen in it. And I decided that I wanted to do like, real simple Prabhupada program of like prasadam and kirtan. And that's going to be the focus of the center. So, and then I don't know if you had any other questions, but getting into
no, continue. This is
how
great.
the center took off.
So
I rented the spot. I stuck, a pretty penny into it. And I mean, I put a lot of like really nice details in it. It's a nice center. Krishna like took over and started sending people to me like out of nowhere. This one devotee in town, I didn't know this guy existed. He was like a full on, strictly practicing devotee. And he reached out to me on Instagram and offered, help with the center. At the same time, he was also applying at my restaurant, like just
really?
coincidentally, or I thought it was coincidental. I didn't know this guy from anyone. So I got this. So as I'm talking to him on Instagram, I get an email and it's his resume, and I noticed, and I'm like, hey, did you also apply at this place? And he said, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's my place. So I hired him at the shop, and he kind of became like my right-hand guy at the Bhakti Center. His name is Dhanaraj. And so, I opened the temple, I opened the center.
How long ago was that?
So I opened on New Year's Day.
Oh, okay.
January
Pretty
1st.
recently then.
Yeah. I didn't really know how I was going to do anything. So my intention was I would just do everything myself. And I knew that it would be a burden, but again, I have this debt to Krishna that I owe. And like, so how can I pay him? How can I pay him for allowing me back, to Krishna consciousness? And how can I serve Srila Prabhupada by using my, using what I've got?
Yeah.
So I figured, all right, I'll do everything for a bit. I didn't know how to cook. That was never my service. My ex-wife was an expert cook. She did that in the temples, but I had never made any. I mean, I tried cooking halava once and I used salt instead of sugar. And that was the end of that. So, I'm not a cook, and I figure, how am I going to cook a feast? Because I knew I wanted to do like a weekly Krishna feast.
Right. I love your posts, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Picture of the plate and stuff. I love that.
Yeah. I don't know how they come out, man. I tell you, it's Krishna. Like, he's cooking through me because I don't know what I'm doing. But I asked my ex-wife, I said, can you come meet me at the center a week before we opened and just teach me like the basics, how to make like dal and halva.
Wow.
And, she went through it with me, and, we made like some garangas, and mind you, it's all vegan too, because I figured,
Right.
so I'm not vegan, but if I'm going to be serving prasadam and I want it accessible to everyone, it should be vegan, right? That way everyone can eat it.
Right.
Plus, how do you really preach like compassion, ahimsa, and we're supporting like factory farm,
Right.
milk. So yeah, so a week before, I'm trying to figure out how to cook, and then the day we open, I cook the feast, and I cook the feast every week now, for about 50 people, and it's always been great, and I think the reason it always comes out good is because when I offer it, I do the regular Sanskrit prayers, but to me that doesn't mean so much. I'm just repeating, I know the Sanskrit by heart, so I'm saying it. Right. And I meditate on, Krishna accepting it, but then I pray in English when I offer it, and I say like, will you please accept this offering so that other people who are coming can benefit from your mercy? That's the only reason I'm doing this.
Beautiful.
Give people your mercy, and he accepts it because it comes out good. And so that's kind of the program we do. We have a weekly Krishna feast every Friday, and it's just free and COVID friendly. We have like a plexiglass barrier up, and people walk up. We hand them a to-go box.
Nice.
We usually do like 5 preparations, and we do everything from like your basic like ISKCON, halva, rice and dal, to like barbecue. Yesterday we did like barbecue ribs, and mac and cheese, and
Wow.
we do barbecue. We've done like I made mole once. Like, I'm making all these things. I mean, I've never cooked anything, and now I'm making like these like
Kind of
fancy
complex
things. So we did I made lasagna one day. So we just mix it up, and I dress the deities once a week. We have some nice deities at the center. And then we have a weekly kirtan night. And then we have like a yoga talk every Thursday with Donna Raj, who I was talking about, my right-hand guy there.
Yeah.
And now we have Monday yoga. We're working with this group in town doing yoga, like free yoga. So it's really cool. And we've got, just in the short time we've been open, we've got like this nice core group of like, 6 or 7 devotees who are, they show up, they're in tilak. I mean, they're more devotees than I don't do any of that. I don't wear tilak, or any of it. It's, to me, it's not necessary. But
right.
These kids are like, they're just taking to Krishna consciousness. There's been such a void for so long in Portland.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like older Prabhupada disciples in town too. So they're all pretty stoked that it's happening, including Bhavananda's ex-wife. She lives here in town. And so that's pretty cool. So I think my long-term goal with it is, I'd like to purchase like a church building, either that or some land just outside of town, and do like a farm.
Wow.
And maybe at some point, if I want to get into more businesses, I could open up a Govinda's, but I need devotees here for that. There's not a lot of devotees in town, so
right. How do you maintain the temple? Is it completely based upon your income?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I'd like to say it's based on donations, but that's not true. I think the prasadam pays for itself, through donations, but yeah, I pay for it. I pay for the, the rent and the bills and everything. And again, I just consider it my personal seva. So, if I was like a grahasta attached to a temple in town, I would probably be working and donating to that temple anyways.
Right.
So, so I do that. The ISKCON temple in Hillsborough here, like they're like an hour outside of town.
Okay.
They recently started giving me like a little monthly donation to help kind of offset the costs,
Very nice.
But I think of Portland Bhakti Center as like an unaffiliated.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about it because I know we talked about it when we initially spoke.
Yeah.
That it's not affiliated with ISKCON, and tell me a little bit about your thought process behind that.
Well, because it's a Bhakti center, so I want to embrace Bhakti in all of its forms. I don't feel, obviously, I'm appreciative and thankful for ISKCON because none of us would be devotees without ISKCON having been born. But I don't feel an obligation one way or the other towards ISKCON or Gaudiya Math or whatever. I mean, I don't think we're a big enough movement to be dividing ourselves up into camps.
Yeah, it's true.
and that was very much my first guru's mentality. Was, again, he was, like, I didn't even talk to my friend who became an Narayana Maharaj disciple. We didn't talk for years because I felt like, oh, everything outside of ISKCON is bogus, and that's bogus. That thought process, it's dangerous. And there's so yeah, for me, it's just not about like the club mentality. I don't care one way or the other. And it's not even about, like, again, it's bhakti, and bhakti is a process that has taken us, I mean, literally it's taken us billions of years to get to this point in bhakti.
Yeah.
So my whole attitude towards it is, I don't need you to come and chant 16 rounds and do I'm not going to tell you to give this up and give that up. Like, I just want people to have access to do some service, to come to the temple or come to the center, wash some pots or chant or do kirtan, whatever, and just have access to bhakti, and have access to Krishna. And, like, so I don't think there's time to be, concerning ourselves with this camp and that camp. And, I'm not blind to the shortcomings of ISKCON over the years,
Yeah.
I have a lot of issues with a lot of things in ISKCON. And so, while I support ISKCON as a vessel for bhakti, and, the largest international Hare Krishna organization, like, Vishnu has many arms, it's what I always say. Like, so there's ISKCON, there's Gaudiya Math, there's Narayana Maharaj, Tripurari, whatever. They're just different, different legs of the same, branch. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was one kind of decision I made when I thought that I would open up the center, is that it's not gonna belong to anyone.
I like the mood, what you're saying, that you're just asking people to come and kind of just add Krishna to their life, whatever their life may be, whatever they may be doing. No, not telling them, well, you need to give this up, give that up. That I would say that comes, in my opinion, comes much later. But initially, when you want people to come to Krishna consciousness, just kind of introduce them to the joy of service and chanting and things like that. And I think that's something that we're missing right now. And you're filling that, by you doing your little thing in Portland, Oregon. I think that's so beautiful. And I want everyone who's listening to kind of like be exposed to that. It's possible to bring it back to the old days and the kind of the pioneering times of Krishna consciousness, where things are much easier, more easy, not necessarily easier, but more I think pleasurable, in the sense of introducing people to Krishna consciousness and having a small group of devotees who you can really kind of like connect with and just be yourself and introduce people to Krishna consciousness and be devotees together.
Right. I mean, Prabhupada never, he didn't come and just start telling people, like, oh, give this up and give that up. I mean, for what? Like, the first couple of years, like, no one even had shaved their head, or, I mean, I was reading that story recently in Miracle on 2nd Avenue.
Yeah.
Where Shama Sundar is, like, carving Lord Jagannath, and there's like a cigarette sitting on
right. Yes.
I mean, Prabhupada was super liberal in that way, and then when people wanted to take more seriously to it, he said, okay, well, you have to give this up and this up, but who would join? Like, I would have never, well, actually, I knew the principles before I moved into the temple, because Tara had explained them to me, but I thought he was crazy with it. Like, I'm not gonna, if I come to a temple and someone's like, you're a 20-year-old guy and someone's like, yeah, you should give up like sex attraction and, you know, all this stuff. I mean, I was already vegetarian anyways from like 13, but you know, it's not, I mean, I don't think Krishna consciousness is about what you give up. It's about what you add to your life. And, you know,
Yeah.
and so, if people want to take that up, I mean, we have to understand that this is a voluntary movement, you know, and my training in Krishna consciousness was very much the opposite. It was, you know, you live in the temple. I understand living in the temple because, you know, you're living monastically and you're relying on the temple for sustenance and maintenance. And so, yeah, you owe them something, you know, so you do your share of the work, but, you know, I have to keep this in mind constantly because it's the old ways, you know, they die hard. Like the other day, for example, my right-hand guy, Dhanaraj, he was telling me that because of some other obligations he can't put quite as much time into the center as he was in the beginning. No problem, you know. But my initial reaction was like, oh, well, you're abandoning your duties. Like, better to do your duty, you know, whatever. Like I'm trying to preach him like that. And he had to remind me that it's a voluntary movement. Like, and that was always lost on me. Like when I lived in the temples, nothing was voluntary. You just did what you did, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's pretty important to remember that. And like these people that are coming to the temple, they're special souls, you know, like, and who am I to tell them, you know, oh, don't do this or give this up. I mean, they have probably been devotees longer than I have. You know, I mean, we have this one girl who comes to the temple, clearly was a devotee in her last life. Like no question.
Right.
You know, the
like
philosophy just resonates with her. She's only been coming around for like a few weeks. She's like in Tilak and, you know, she's offering all of her food and it's pretty cool to see, you know, and I think people get burnt out when you want to like, you know, start adding all these. I just want to keep it simple. Like, a couple older Prabhupada disciples have come to the center, and they said that it's very reminiscent of like 26 Second Avenue, you know, or it's a small storefront. I could only imagine after COVID when we could actually have like rows of people sitting on the floor taking prasad. Like,
oh, wonderful. That would be nice.
It's going to be super cool, you know?
Yeah. I want to ask you, how do you not feel any bitterness or any kind of resentment, or maybe you do, but in your attitude that I'm interacting with you right now, I don't feel that from you, where you went through through so many years of your young life, and you sacrificed so much for ISKCON, for the temple, and you feel, you know, I would feel like I lost some of those years, you know, and you said you wanted to make some of that back when you had left and things like. How do you not feel that bitterness?
I mean, I think
maybe you do. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I certainly felt that bitterness, you know, when I had decided to leave the movement. I can't hold a grudge. It's like, you know, we're all dumb, you know, we've all done stupid things, and I know that some of the things that happened that caused me to leave, you know, again, I just keep in mind that it's not the philosophy itself. You know, it doesn't mean that I don't have bitterness towards, like, yeah, I resent that my guru abandoned us and, you know, wasn't following like my entire time being initiated by him. You know, he wasn't following the principles. He wasn't chanting. I never saw him chant, you know, and I just figured like, well, he's, you know, it's because he's with Krishna and his mom, you know, whatever. But there is resentment there, but I can't let that dictate or, you know, I can't let that rule me and my approach to Krishna consciousness. I mean, our philosophy is second to none, right? So there's no issue there.
Yeah.
And Prabhupada was a perfect spiritual authority. And so while I've had spiritual authorities go rogue and, you know, not uphold their end of the bargain, like it doesn't. And ultimately, you know, nothing happens without Krishna, right? Like in an ultimate sense, like nothing. We can't say a word without Krishna, you know?
Yeah.
pulling the strings. And so what happened, and it was, I have to look at it like that. Why hold resentment? I mean, it's the same as the people that have called me out for my past behavior. While they're absolutely right for calling me out because they were affected by my behavior. But they can't let my behavior, control and dictate their future. So, or I would hope that they don't. Right. And so in the same way, like, I can't hold, other people accountable for my own fall down, like it was my fault ultimately, so, but I do have resentment. There is, again, I'm not blind to the stuff that went on in ISKCON and the way people have been treated and the changes that need to take place. So instead of like resenting and harboring these like ill thoughts and living in the past, I am more concerned with how I can affect change in our movement moving forward. It just seems to be more productive to do that. To, how can I make the movement better?
Yeah, whatever sphere of influence you have in your own little, in your kind of circle, that's how you can become positive, how you can positively affect people instead of living in the past and living with negative thoughts and stuff. That's wonderful. I really appreciate that. I mean, that's
even my first guru. I talked to him now. We've reconciled. Sure, he's reached out to me a couple times over the years, and I was like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, we talked. We talked a couple months ago. I mean, again, I think he's actually like a great devotee, and like he still travels and preaches. I don't know. I have mixed feelings, when I see him up on the Vyasa giving a class. But the way I look at it is, again, it's taken us billions of years to get where we are. To expect that any of our gurus are without a single fault or human trait, it's just not realistic. And so maybe he shouldn't have been a guru, that's all.
Right.
Still, he's a great preacher. He's made thousands of devotees. Our program that we had was dynamic. We made tons of devotees. He inspired so many people. He loves Prabhupada. So what's wrong with him continuing to inspire people and preach Krishna consciousness? Just don't be a guru. Like, if you have a problem if you have an issue with the principles and you can't follow them, just don't be a guru.
Right.
But I mean, we have gurus in our movement that have admittedly like fallen down and then they're still gurus. So, I don't really see a problem with it. And so in that sense, I can't resent him either for that. I mean, I fell down too. So how could I blame him? Like we're humans and we're practicing a strict monastic life that for all intents and purposes goes against our nature. I mean, you take these 20-year-old kids and, you're telling them to basically suppress all these natural, human emotions and desires and whatever, but instead they should just be engaged properly. I think the movement now, it's far better, in its current state than it was, because it's largely a non-monastic movement now, and so I think people are being more properly engaged. There's no, since I've come back, I don't hear a whole lot of talk about like karmis and, Maya and this and that. Just they're, some of the biggest devotees in our movement are, they live outside, they have their families, and
right.
That's great. But, that wasn't really an option when I joined. It was kind of like even grahastas who lived in the temple were still like, yeah, they're not brahmacharis. They only became grahastas because they couldn't follow the principles. That's kind of how I was trained, and it's kind of ridiculous.
It's a different time period.
Yeah, different time period. And I really like the direction of the movement is going since I've come back. I mean, for one, kirtan is absolutely crazy now. The best kirtan we had when I left, the best kirtan out there was like, Kadamba Swami had like just kind of stepped on the scene as like he had just started taking disciples.
Wow.
And in fact, Parthasarathi, I think, was like one of his first disciples there.
Right.
And that was like as good as it got. you know, Bhakti True Swami, I think he had like a nice CD or tape out, you know.
Yes, I remember.
But now, I mean, you listen just all this stuff, you know, Chuta Gopi, like just all these, like, I mean, kirtan is amazing now. And so I love it. And the movement as a whole, it's becoming more progressive, you know, which I think is a necessary. It's like, even if you personally don't have a progressive agenda, even if you're a conservative or whatever, you still have to accept that the only way you could move forward is through progress, you know, and through having a progressive agenda. Like even when I was like, you know, a strict devotee and I considered myself politically conservative, which I don't anymore. I'm the furthest thing from it. But when I was politically conservative, I still supported a lot of progressive like laws, because that's how you're going to move forward as a society. You're not going to, you know, you can't move forward by holding on to tradition. You know, you have to embrace change, you know. So we're in a completely different time, place, and circumstance now than we were when Prabhupada was around, or shortly after, or even in the 90s, you know. It's a different time.
Something I'm appreciating about what you're saying is, and about this whole story, was that you kind of became your authentic self, and then you added Krishna consciousness again to that. And I think that's what a lot of devotees struggle with, is becoming their authentic self, because there is so much kind of social pressure to look a certain way, to act a certain way, to be a certain way. Then that kind of hinders your natural, what you naturally are. So for our listeners, what would you recommend our listeners to do to become their more authentic self with Krishna consciousness?
Yeah, totally. No, that is a good point. And I do feel like that with myself. Like, you know, my leaving for 10 years, it was almost necessary for me to, you know, because again, I joined Krishna Consciousness. I was like 18 years old. Who are you at 18? You know, I didn't know who I was, what my nature is, you know, and I wasn't allowed to experience that until I had moved out. Right. And so I think that long hiatus was kind of necessary for me to figure out what my strengths are, so that we can have a center here. Like, if I hadn't become a brand builder and a business developer, like I wouldn't have the resources to do what I'm doing here. So I think for people in general, you know, anything could be used in Krishna consciousness. Like we were talking recently about, someone had asked, you know, how you can engage, how you can use like a certain instrument or whatever in Krishna consciousness. Like, how do you use like a turntable or a mixer or whatever in Krishna consciousness, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, we were talking about how there's nothing intrinsically spiritual about a harmonium or a mridanga. They're made out of the same thing a guitar is made out of. I mean, they're wood and metal and whatever, but they're only spiritual because you're using them to do kirtan. So it's not like we have to look for outside of ourselves for what we have the tools, right? Like whatever you're doing now, if you're not a devotee, or if you're, you know, or if you're a devotee and you're trying to figure out like how to, you know, how to serve, like you can do whatever you're doing. Like a Govinda's restaurant wouldn't be spiritual by nature, but because it has prasadam, it's a spiritual restaurant. It's no different than another restaurant.
Right.
You know, so I think for people to I think suppressing your nature is a bad idea. You know, so some people are built for that. Some people are you know, are programmed to, you know, maybe to be a brahmachari or be a sannyasi or whatever. But people that aren't, there's no problem. Like, you know, you could be just as Krishna conscious by using whatever your God-given talents are, you know, or whatever you've been doing in your life. You can engage that in service. Like, you know, I essentially did the same thing building out the center as I did building out my restaurant. It was the same process, the same licensing process, but one of them is spiritual and one of them's not, you know?
Right.
Actually, even my restaurant now is spiritual because we're offering the food and everything. But
Oh, wonderful. The Jewish
yeah,
the
Jewish deli.
deli. Wow, very cool.
But yeah, I just encourage anyone to, like, you know, you, you don't have to look like, I saw recently someone had someone on my social media, they like moved to India because they had posted that, I just don't feel like I could be Christian conscious without like completely being surrounded by devotees all the time. And that's important. Devotee association is super important, obviously.
Yeah.
But, there's nothing. I mean, you could be Christian conscious and not live in India. It's just so I think people should just do what they're doing, as long as it's favorable, but find a way to tie that into Christian consciousness. Like there's so many devotee musicians out there doing stuff that I'm seeing, and like that's all they're doing. They live outside, they work a normal job, whatever, but they have this talent, and so they're using it.
Yeah.
Glorify Krishna.
Yeah. I think a lot of, devotees I talk to, they struggle just with kind of becoming their more authentic self.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying is very, you just have to, like, you can't suppress who you are.
Right.
Like that's just gonna make you go backwards, or you're just gonna feel like, yeah, you're just gonna completely go the other way, because it's like you're pulling a rubber band, and it's eventually you're gonna have to let go, and it's gonna go the other way
at some point. Yeah,
it's gonna snap. Yeah,
and that's the problem. That's why, I mean, how many brahmacharis and brahmacharinis, just how many people joined in the 80s and 90s that aren't around now, or that aren't, practicing brahmacharya or whatever. Like, it's because, we suppressed ourselves. And that's why I think that having a non-monastic movement, like a largely non-monastic movement as we are nowadays,
yeah,
it's a little more practical, because people already know what their nature are. Like people are getting into Christian consciousness, they already know, who they are, what they like, what they know how to do, and then they come to Christian consciousness, they could apply that. But
yeah,
when you join and you just move into the temple, and right away you have to give up everything, and you have to do this job and that job. I mean, like I said, my entire time in the temples, I was never engaged, but according to my nature, and I think that's like super important to understand, like what your nature is. I mean, and you see that a lot with like devotees. There tends to be like, there's a lot of devotee businesses, a lot of like, money is generally not like very great with with devotee, like financial
yeah, totally.
because and you see that just even outside of devotional life, like just in entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah,
a lot of people, they try to start a business, they start it and they fail because, and there's nothing wrong with that, it's just not it's not who they are. Like not everyone's cut out to own a business. Just like I have to own a business because I can't work for anyone because I'm a bad employee.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna break the rules, whatever they are. So I understand that. And so even not as a devotee, I understood that was my nature, is to like engage in that way. And so if I can use it in Christian consciousness, and that's why our center is being successful, because I know what I'm doing with that.
And also the way you kind of lead devotees now, I'm sure, is so much more different than the way you were led. You're engaging people according to their propensity and their nature. And if someone's like, I don't know about that, you're not gonna be like, oh no, you have to do this. You're gonna say, okay, I mean, do what this is like is that how you're running it now? In the sense of how you engage people.
Oh yeah. People come, I don't even try to like go out of my way to engage people in service, because that could also be, I mean, that's what we want to do, is engage people in service, but that could be taken as also like pressure, like if devotional service, you're going to make advancement anyways. If you do service, even against your will, you're still doing like, but don't we want people to choose to serve Krishna? Like, so when people come, I'm not asking them, hey, would you mind going in the kitchen and washing some pots? But I wait until they ask, like, is there something I could do? And I say, yeah, go in the kitchen and wash some pots.
Yeah.
And now we have people, they show up and they ask, like, oh, is there anything that needs to be done in the kitchen, or can I help serve out or whatever?
Wow.
if it's coming from that genuine place, like I think it's going to be more, because it's all about intention. You know, you could be a brahmachari living in the temple and reluctantly chanting your rounds and reluctantly going out on Sankirtan while you're, you know, looking at, you know, the pretty girl walking by or whatever. Like, and how many brahmacharis have been in that position?
Oh yeah.
You know, but you're doing it because they're telling, like, again, I was never meant to be a Sankirtan devotee. And all I would do when I was out on Sankirtan, I mean, I you know, I distribute books, but, you know, I was just like, I was engaged in just like checking people out. I'm like, oh yeah, these people seem like they're having fun. Like, I wouldn't mind doing that, you know?
Right.
And I just shouldn't have been a brahmachari when it comes down to it. Like, it just wasn't my nature. I mean, for a bit it was, you know?
Yeah.
And it's good training. I do believe that that's a necessary part. I think the monastic branch of our movement is necessary. Like, every religion has that.
Yeah.
But, you know, most religions, they don't, you know, any of the world religions, you don't just join it and then poof, you become a monk, you know, like, you know, look, most Catholics aren't, you know, friars. They're
Just
normal lay people, you know, they're not clergy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I understand the need for us having been a largely monastic movement in the beginning, because we were building a worldwide movement. Like, it made sense, you know.
Yeah.
But I think now it's a different time. I think we have to, you know, our movement has to recognize what we've done, our faults and our you know, our shortcomings, and rectify them and move on, and you know, move on better. I mean, you see that happening a lot. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of stuff has come to light in the past few years about stuff that's gone on in the movement. I think it's great. I think, just like when I was called out for being a jerk, I was super crushed by it and it was horrible. But now I could look at it in hindsight as a blessing. Like,
Yeah.
for one, even just not from a devotional point of view, but just to have been part of that process, I feel like I'm glad to have been part of, because that's necessary as a society for us to, you know, call out our you know, abusers or whatever, and you know, hold them accountable. So I'm glad that I could take part in that. I wish not as the not as the one who's being called out. I wish that was different, but you know, it was but for Krishna conscious wise, you know, it was a blessing. I would not have come back to Krishna consciousness without it. I mean, I would have one way or another, obviously, but
Yeah.
you know, it was necessary for me. So in that sense, I think it's good. So I think if you know, ISKCON would just acknowledge the things that have happened. I mean, you see it changing a lot. You know, we have Vaishnavi gurus, which is great. You know, that I don't know why that didn't happen in the beginning. I do know why, but it shouldn't have happened in the beginning. You know, I mean, and a lot of that happened because of this false suppression that we're talking about, right? Like, you had all these 18-year-old boys. You know, you're joining the movement. You were, you know, expected to suppress your attraction to women. And so what did we do? We villainized women.
Right.
And because what easier way is there to reject something than to hate that thing?
Right.
You know, so that's what we did. And it really had a horrible effect on our movement, and a lot of people's spiritual lives got destroyed by it. Now I see that we're coming into it. We're, you know, we're kind of finally like fixing the problems, and you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it, you know, I think we're moving in the right direction.
What are your children like now? They must be teenagers.
Yeah, my oldest is 19.
Oh wow.
She's a journalism major in college, and my youngest two are, I have a 13-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl. And it's interesting for them, you know, with the whole leaving thing. My oldest was born, you know, her first year of life was when we lived in Germany at the temple, you know, and she shouldn't remember that because she was a baby, but she remembers us moving back, and, you know, or after we moved back, she remembers going to the temple. They all have, you know, devotee names, you know, and
nice.
But they, after our first one, like by the time we left, I think our middle child was like 5 or, you know, 6. She has a couple memories. Our son has no memory of it. And, you know, that's kind of upsetting to me. Like, in a sense, I failed them like that, you know, like it was my responsibility to raise them Krishna conscious, and I didn't. and so it's hard to, I'm not going to go like preach to them now.
Yeah.
By the way, we should do, even for my partner, it's very hard because when we got together, I wasn't a devotee. She didn't know me in this life, even though I spent over half my life as a devotee. For her, this is just a new thing. And she's like, whoa, you're taking on this new religion. And when I first got back into it, I have to admit, I was a little fanatical. I think it was, one day I'm not a devotee. The next day I'm getting ready to open a center, because again, it's all or nothing for me,
Right.
And so she's like, all right, well, I understand you wanting to take on a little bit of this practice, but now you're, running a center and you're offering, you won't let me touch the food before you offer it. And I've got deities in the house. And,
wow.
Even though this is a return to my old self, it's not the opposite. It's not like I'm taking on something.
Yeah, but she didn't see that.
Yeah. Even within Krishna consciousness, I've taken on different identities because I had a different name initially when I was, through my first guru.
Yeah.
And I when I was reinitiated, my name changed. So, but with my kids, things are cool. I think my oldest, I think because of some of the things that me and my ex-wife have told her about, some of the abuse that my ex-wife experienced in the Brahmacharini ashram. And, I certainly experienced some. I got punched in the face once by my bhakta leader.
Oh my God.
for just saying why. All I said was why when he told me something.
Oh my Lord.
Boom, punch me in the face. So, so she's not, and my daughter's very intelligent and, she's almost 20. She's not dumb. And so she has her opinion
Of course.
of it, but, she don't hate it or anything, and I think the more time that goes on now with me taking this, she sees that, since I've taken back to Krishna consciousness, I'm changing a lot of my ways of being a jerk to people,
Right.
I'm being more empathetic and more, just more understanding of people and, kinder, less hate and stuff. And so she sees that, I hope.
Entrepreneurship is interesting to me. I'm interested to know, are you less ambitious now in the sense of like I know your kids are older and things but to maintain yourself and to live a prosperous life and things like that, are you less ambitious now that you've come back to Krishna consciousness and you're practicing again? Do you feel yourself less ambitious?
That is a good question, actually. I hadn't even thought about that, but I could see how that would happen because we're constantly, and I don't know so much nowadays how people are trained, but I know when I was trained, everything outside of Krishna consciousness was horrible.
Yeah.
So that would mean that my, doing business or interacting with non-devotee, that was horrible. And so if I would have done this back then, I definitely see how I would become less ambitious because all I want to aspire for is to be a great devotee.
Yes.
So now having, coming back into the movement and understanding, who I am and what my nature is, no, I'm no less ambitious. In fact, I'm more ambitious because
really
I need to support the center.
Oh, that's
I'm
right.
paying for everything, man. So
right.
And my business is right now. It's like it's going through like a huge boost right now. Like we're pretty big in the vegan community now, and so we're kind of taking off even more
now in the restaurant.
Yeah, in the restaurant.
Business. Oh, okay.
And and the center is starting. The word's starting to get out about that. So. No, I think I'm more ambitious. It's our duty.
Very interesting.
Just this whole false renunciation. That's not me. I'm not a renunciate. And
nice.
So, yeah, that is a good question though. I could see a lot of people going that route or being less ambitious because they just want to please Guru and Gauranga and not be like practical people.
Right. I am ambitious in certain way for businesses and things. And an astrologer told me in my past lives I was a renunciate. So in this life, I'm having trouble trying to, kind of reconciling having that desire to be have money and to be ambitious, but at the same time, having these past lives of renunciation. So I've kind of have to like give up that and try to, do that. Anyways,
That's interesting. Yeah, Krishna Consciousness, I think, helps you with that. Even in the height of my success and my material fervor, I wasn't necessarily attached to. For me, it was more about, making like attaining the things, right? Making things happen and being able to buy this car or that or whatever. But it wasn't necessarily the items I was attached to. Like I always had. Like when I had a bunch of businesses and I was doing all this, I was driving a Range Rover or like a Jaguar, every 6 months I had a different car. I had all these things, but I don't think my attachment was necessarily to the things.
Okay.
It was to my ability to get the things.
I see.
And I think probably because I lived as a devotee in the temple and everything, I didn't have that attachment to, materials. Even now, like I still make money and like I have business and, but I'm not necessarily attached to those things. I just like making things happen.
Yeah.
Even the center. And another thing about realizing your nature is like, there's nothing wrong with your nature. Like, so for example, for me, I'm not that great with people. I understand that about myself. Like I could come off very like intimidating and like aggressive and kind of be a jerk. But I'm very good at like pulling strings and making stuff happen, right? So I open the center, but then my guy, Dhanaraj, he's very like, he's a loving, kind guy. He cares about like relationships with devotees and how they're doing. So I put him in charge of that. I was like, you be the community outreach coordinator, and you deal with the people. I'm just going to make the center go and I'll do kirtan and like, I'll build it up. But I understand that about even when I was a barber, like after a while, I stopped cutting hair and I just owned the shops because having me in the shop was actually detrimental to my business because my nature is not like, I'm not the most likable guy. My most likable quality is that I'm a Hare Krishna devotee. I think that's my most likable trait. So, so I could do that with the center and then it also helps me engage people according to their nature.
Right.
By Donna, Raj, you're very nice with people, so you deal with them. I'm not going to deal with
I think that's using your entrepreneur qualities to it's one of the things is like, if you don't know how to do it, don't like fake it and try to do it. Actually put the person who's meant to be doing those things in that position, and then your business will succeed, or whatever you're trying to do will succeed.
Yeah, and Prabhupada was expert at that,
Yeah.
Which devotees were able to, travel to this country and to open, and just start Krishna consciousness there. He didn't just send like any random, bhakta, like, okay, you move to Russia and you go do this, like he engaged people properly. Yeah, it's like that. I mean, I wouldn't have learned that in the temple. I mean, I was a bhakti leader or temple president for like a hot minute. And, and all I did was like, nothing, like just make people feel bad about themselves, probably, like I didn't engage, it was just like a power trip for me. I didn't engage people. Now I'd probably be a decent person in that role because I understand how to like engage people.
Totally. It'd be more than decent. It'd be great. You'd be great. Let's look at, we're running low on time here, but let's look at the comment section, because a lot of devotees are sending their appreciation here, and some questions as well. Let's see. Okay, here our friend Raghav Pandit Rob Ellings. Great story. I can relate a lot. Mohan Prabhu says, thank you very much for your service, Prabhuji. While we don't recognize enough, if we are experiencing freedom, it's because of sacrifice of people like you for the country and ISKCON. So some appreciation there. John V. Harrison says, no, I'm ecstatic at this entrepreneurial success. When you were telling your story, this is from maybe like an hour ago. I don't get to the comments until later. What an interesting life. Mathura asked, question for later. What are your views on death?
Do you want me to answer that?
Go, please. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a fan of it, but I mean, I have your typical Hare Krishna views on death. I mean, no one wants to die. I mean, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was a very good example of that. You know, like he wrote a lot about that when he was basically on his deathbed, you know.
Right.
And he explained how it's a very natural human emotion to be like afraid of death, even if you're situated in Krishna consciousness. It's the unknown, you know, and everyone's scared of that. I mean, so I mean, my views on death, I mean, I'm gonna die. I hope that, you know, by doing this little service of, you know, this Portland Bhakti Center or something like that, then I could be situated. I have a pretty different view on like what is required to get back to Godhead, you know, like, you know, I don't know if there's like speculation or whatever, but I don't think we need to be like on Prabhupada's level. I don't think we need to be like an Uttama Adhikari, like, and that's the only way we can get back to Godhead. I mean, look at some of these people that Prabhupada himself acknowledged went back to Godhead, right? Like Jayananda and Vishnu John Swami. I mean, they were around for what, like a few years before they left their body, you know, but because they were so engaged in service, and because Jayananda, like, you know, had organized Rath Yatra and like had, you know, had served the devotees and served Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said he went back to Godhead. It's not that, you know, I mean, I don't know what level Jayananda was, you know, but, you know, it's not that we have to be. I think it's just, it's all about intention. So if we engage, if we dedicate our life to serving Krishna and serving Prabhupada, like, I think that's enough, you know, to help, at least to help get us back to Godhead. So, you know, hopefully, I don't know, we'll see what happens.
Dhanaraj Prabhu is actually listening. You're a great listener, Namras Prabhu. You're drawing this amazing story with very reflective questions. Thank you very much.
Hey, that's Dhanaraj who I was talking about.
Right. Also, Govardhana Prabhu's experience makes him sound like an 80-year-old. How does someone fit all of that into a decade? That's true. I mean, how do you fit that?
Like with the businesses and stuff?
Yeah, just everything.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I have a good work ethic, and I got that actually from like being a brahmachari and from being in the army. They both require like
totally
an insane amount of discipline, and you know, so I'm kind of focused like that. If I want to do something, like I'm gonna do it, you know, and I'm not gonna get stopped. So, but also I paid Dhanaraj $20 to say that before the show.
One can see how Krishna removes all the stops and makes the difficult so possible for those who try. Yeah, good point. Michael Eper, this story, wow, so inspiring. John B. Harrison, again, wow, this is so moving. Thank you so much for sharing with us with honesty and vulnerability. Yeah, I mean, we didn't touch on that at all, but thank you for being vulnerable with your story. I mean, that's, and for everyone who's hearing, they can all benefit from it. Beautiful history. Thank you so much for sharing. So much real talk. So very much inspiring. Donna Kaylee Dasi says, is Mahabala Prabhu still in Portland? We first gave him a Bhagavad Gita when he was a student at IL St. University in 1996. He gradually became an initiated devotee in Portland. Do you know this devotee?
I don't know a Mahabala. There's a Brihad Bala. I don't know if the name got, you know, messed up in translation or whatever, but I'm not familiar with the Mahabala. But yeah, I don't know. I was not here in 96 yet anyways.
Okay.
Or 98. So
Babita says, we think you're a great cook.
Babita's the wife of the temple president in Hillsborough here, like an hour.
Oh, okay.
She is a great cook. So I think that's just a joke. You know, she's pretty.
Ruchira Matachi says, go for the farm. She's actually a Prabhupada disciple who has a huge farm in Alachua with many cows. So that's nice to hear that.
Maybe we can discuss that at some point. Maybe she
can
help me with that.
We are so also unqualified anyway. So much truth in all of this. This was at the time when we were discussing that. Oh yeah, Jay, no time to be concerned with this camp or that when just giving access to bhakti, the one you're talking about that. These podcasts is so nice. Every time we meet so many interesting people with different views. Thank you, Namras Prabhu. Thank you, for our guests who actually say some amazing things. This is so nice. Thanks for inviting. Okay, this is from Cap. This is a great mood and attitude. Burnout is such a danger, and it's great to understand it. Where are you personally drawing your inspiration and re-energizing from now as this change settles? Great point. I mean, I think that's what really came out in this interview about refinding yourself and your true self and then connecting that with Krishna. Beautiful.
Yeah. Did you want me to answer that? Where am I finding my inspiration from?
Yeah. I mean, you can, yes.
Well, obviously, Srila Prabhupada, I mean, you know, Prabhupada said that those who risk the most in Krishna consciousness are rewarded the most. You know, in the rhinoceros hunter analogy, right? That you know, he wants his devotees to be rhino hunters, right? If you hunt for a rhinoceros, no one could fault you if you don't catch it, because no one catches a rhino. But if you catch it,
Right.
then that's a great success. So I feel like taking on like the burden of, you know, and the austerity of like having the center and everything, it's very purifying for me, and it's very humbling actually. Like the people that come to the center, like I very much see Krishna's hand in it, and that I'm not actually doing any of this, you know. So that gives me a lot of inspiration, knowing that Krishna is so reciprocal. I mean, you know, it's funny, we talk about Krishna as a supreme person, right? And we tell people that when we're talking to people on the street, and they're like, oh, how could Krishna be this or that? And we tell everyone how, you know, even we as limited people, we're approachable in from many different angles, you know. But Krishna, who's unlimited, like I think devotees tend to limit him too. Like we could just have conversations with Krishna, like we're having. Like, why couldn't we do that? Krishna's Paramatma, you know?
Yeah.
Like, so I find that inspiration a lot, is how Krishna like directly takes charge or you know, pulls strings. Also, you know, Prabhupada, I take a lot of inspiration also from like Hridayananda Maharaj. I listen to a lot of his you know, his talks lately.
Yeah.
Probably more than anyone. I really like his view on like how we're going to move forward as a movement.
Right.
And I like his like liberal nature. I very much feel like that too. Like, you know, again, like I don't do a lot of the things that devotees do. You know, I don't really wear tilak. I mean, maybe if I go to the temple, I'll wear tilak. But like,
yeah,
when I first opened the center, that ISKCON had put out an article about the center, and it, you know, had a picture of me offering arti to the deities, and I was wearing like jeans and a hoodie, and like they were clean, but you know, I got a little bit of flack for that. Oh, you're not wearing devotional dress, and just that's a whole other topic. But the whole idea of this like this external devotional appearance of devotees, like it doesn't concern me.
It's so interesting that you know, for someone who left and now who is re-entered, like why would that concern you? It wouldn't, because you have seen kind of what the outside is like, and now you are accepting as much Krishna consciousness as you want to take,
right,
you know, in a very sincere way. So like if you don't wear a dhoti or do wear a dhoti, like it, for you personally, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
like,
what does it matter?
Like but does everyone, you know, for everyone to come to that kind of sincere, to come to their true self, like, do we have to go through what you went through? Like, how do we get to that point of our sincere, true nature without kind of having gone on the outside and seen what it is? You know, it's a very tricky thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it's understanding the essence of, you know, like what Prabhupada wanted. I mean, you look at Bhaktisiddhanta, he made all kinds of concession to spread Krishna consciousness. He had his sannyasis wearing Western clothes and traveling in cars. And I mean, who's really practicing? I don't know a single brahmachari ever who's worn a deerskin loincloth and carried a copper pot. You know, it's just, it's not what we do. And like, so, you know, you know, and I also from having left, I'm also able to see how outsiders view us. And that helps with my approach to outsiders. Like, for example, I like wearing dhotis and I like devotional dress. There's no, you know, but I don't do it because no one in Portland is walking around in a dhoti and a kurta. So if I'm the sole guy walking around in a dhoti, all I'm telling people is that, oh, I'm not one of you. Like, you know, you can't relate to me. Like, I'm different. We're different. And I want people to see that Krishna is accessible to everyone. You know, I mean, the only reason that people ever wore dhoti and kurta anyways is because they were Indian. Like in India, they wear dhotis and kurta. You know, like that's why that became devotional dress. But, you know, I want people to see that however you are, whatever state you're in, you could approach Krishna. I mean, sure, you want to be clean. You know, like I wear clean clothes when I go and dress the deities, but they're clean clothes like this, you know, because this is how I dress. Like, why if I put on a different shirt, that all of a sudden I'm going to become more Krishna conscious because the material changed, you know?
I don't agree with you, but I do admire what you're saying. I do, and I do see your point. I do see your point, but that's that's how you're doing it, and I think that's, and I do agree. Like, why make someone feel different? That
Right. Like
you're not the
when I
same.
go to India in November, I'm going on this retreat with Raghunath Prabhu, and
Oh, nice.
obviously I'll wear like, I'm around devotees. Like I'm
Right.
gonna dress like a devotee, but
Right.
here, for here, it works, it works differently that way. But I think to each his own. Like, Dhanaraj,
Totally.
he wears, he has a sika and wears tilak all the time. And when he comes to work at my restaurant, he's wearing tilak. You
Right.
know, that's fine too. Whatever, however everyone's comfortable in Krishna consciousness. Personally,
Exactly.
like I don't like, chokers, so I wear like a long, like
Right.
silver tulsi.
Right. Yeah,
But
same here.
it's neither here nor there. Like it's just external to me. I'm not saying that my understanding is right. It's just right for me.
For you. Yeah.
Right.
That's even devotees have a hard time saying that outwardly because you got flack even for what you doing the service with the jeans on and everything. Some people can't handle that. I mean, your personality, my personality also is the same. Like kind of like, okay, you can say what you want, but I'm going to take it I'm going to accept it. I'm going to live it the way I want to live it, not the way someone else is going to tell me how to.
Right.
But yeah,
I mean, for me, Krishna consciousness is, again, consciousness is in the title of our movement. Like it's not Krishna stylishness, it's Krishna consciousness. Like that's what we should be focused on. We should be focused on, are we thinking about Krishna and are we doing what we're doing for Krishna? That should be our focus. And if you need a devotee for that, then that's great. And
great
if
point.
you don't, then that's cool too.
Yeah. Well, Govardhana Prabhu, thank you so much. I mean, this was fantastic. A lot of devotees not criticize me, but they say, why are your podcasts so long? We can't listen to all of it and this and that. And I'm like, now I'm thinking about it, it's like I'm getting so much personally out of these podcasts, just like talking to devotees like you. Like, I admire you so much, and I got so much out of this conversation. Like, I don't care if people don't get it, don't listen to the whole thing, because I personally got so much out of it. But thank you so much. And if people want to get in touch with you, they can go to, they can contact you on Govardhana Das on Facebook. And also Portland Bhakti Center is you have a Facebook page.
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram. It's Portland Bhakti.
Portland Bhakti on Instagram.
That's on Instagram. That's on Facebook too. And on Facebook and Instagram, my personal, I'm Govardhana Das. Well, Facebook, I'm Govardhana Das with an A at the end. And my personal Instagram is of.vraja.
Of.vraja. Okay. Yeah, I can put that in the comments later. But stay on. I'm going to turn off the live. But thank you again so much. This is episode.
Thanks for everyone to watch too.
Yeah. Episode 51, Return to Grace with Govardhana Das. Thank you again so much. And thank you to our listeners. Next week we have, I don't know who we have next week, but have a great Gaur Purnima, everyone. And I will see you later. Again, Prabhu, stay on while I play the outro. Haribol.
Krishna, Hare Krishna.